The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning, just as Dr. Kim Tae-ho was finishing his coffee in the space station's observation deck. The sleek vessel was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, its crystalline surface reflecting starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive. Within hours, every government on Earth was scrambling to figure out what came next. Tae-ho had spent his entire career studying the possibility of alien life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. As Earth's lead xenobiologist, he found himself thrust into the most important meeting in human history. The aliens had requested a diplomatic exchange, and somehow, he was part of the team chosen to represent all of humanity. The alien delegation arrived in smaller craft that moved without any visible propulsion system. Their leader, who introduced herself as Ambassador Velomora through some kind of universal translator, was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Her skin had a translucent quality, and strange crystalline structures grew from her shoulders like delicate wings. But what struck Tae-ho most was how intensely she and her team stared at every human they encountered. The first few hours of contact went smoothly enough. The aliens seemed friendly, even curious about human culture. They asked basic questions about Earth's government's technology and social structures. But Tae-ho noticed something odd happening. Every time a human spoke, the aliens would pull out scanning devices and point them directly at their heads. Lieutenant Park Min-soo, the military liaison assigned to the diplomatic team, whispered to Tae-ho during a brief recess. "Have you noticed how they keep scanning our heads? Every single time someone talks, out come those devices." Tae-ho had noticed. It was becoming uncomfortable, actually. The aliens weren't trying to hide their fascination with human heads, particularly the area around the ears. Their scanning equipment, which looked like silver wands topped with glowing crystals, would buzz and hum every time they pointed them at a human. The breakthrough moment came when researcher Lee So-ra sneezed during the afternoon session. The sound echoed through the meeting room, and suddenly, every alien in the delegation was on their feet, their scanning devices going crazy with activity. They chattered excitedly in their own language, completely forgetting about the translation. Device's Ambassador Velomora finally composed herself and turned to the human delegation with what could only be described as awe. "Forgive our excitement," she said, her translated voice carrying notes of wonder. "But we have never encountered a species with such sophisticated cranial sensor arrays." The humans looked at each other in confusion. Dr. Kim Tae-ho cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Ambassador, but I'm not sure what you mean by sensor arrays." This seemed to surprise the aliens even more. The science officer, a tall being called Quindal, whose crystalline structures pulsed with different colors when he was excited, stepped forward. "The vibration detection systems embedded in your cranial structure. Our instruments indicate they are far more advanced than anything in our galactic database." Park Min-soo leaned forward. "Vibration detection systems?" "Yes," Quindal continued, his excitement growing. "The way your species processes atmospheric pressure waves is remarkable. The sensitivity, the range, the apparent coordination between individuals. We have been studying your responses, and it appears your entire civilization may be built around these capabilities." The human delegation exchanged bewildered glances. Lee So-ra touched her ear unconsciously. "Are you talking about our ears?" The aliens fell silent. Ambassador Velmora's crystalline structures dimmed slightly. "Ears?" "Yes, ears. For hearing," Tae-ho explained slowly. "We hear sounds. That's how we process what you're calling atmospheric pressure waves." But instead of clearing up the confusion, this explanation seemed to make the aliens even more excited. Quindal began pacing, his instruments beeping rapidly. "Hearing, yes, but the sophistication of your processing capabilities suggests something far beyond basic auditory function. The way you coordinate, communicate, react in unison to acoustic stimuli." What the humans didn't realize was that the aliens had been observing them for weeks before making official contact. They had watched humans in cities, seen how people would all turn their heads at the sound of sirens, witnessed crowds moving in apparent coordination during concerts and public events, to beings who communicated primarily through telepathic pulses. The idea that an entire species could coordinate complex behaviors through sound waves seemed like an advanced form of collective consciousness. The misunderstanding deepened when engineer Oh Seung-ho mentioned that the space station had been designed with acoustic considerations in mind. We have sound dampening in the sleeping quarters and acoustic optimization in the communication areas. The aliens interpreted this as evidence of humanity's advanced understanding of sonic warfare and defense. Here was a species that had not only evolved sophisticated sound detection capabilities, but had also learned to manipulate their environment to enhance these abilities. As the first day of contact ended, both sides were equally fascinated and confused. The aliens were convinced they had discovered a species with revolutionary sensory technology, disguised as simple biology. The humans were baffled by the aliens' intense interest in what seemed like the most basic aspect of human physiology. Neither side realized they were on the verge of the greatest misunderstanding in galactic history. The next morning brought new surprises that left everyone more confused than before. Dr. Kim Tae-ho woke up to find 3 aliens stationed outside his quarters, their scanning devices humming softly as they recorded everything. When he opened his door, they immediately pointed their instruments at his head and began taking readings. "Good morning," Tae-ho said cautiously, and the aliens practically vibrated with excitement as their devices lit up like Christmas trees. This pattern continued throughout the day. Every human on the station found themselves under constant observation. The aliens followed them everywhere, documenting their reactions to the most mundane sounds. When the coffee machine beeped in the cafeteria, alien instruments would start buzzing. When someone's communicator chimed, out came the scanning wands. Lieutenant Park Min-soo was getting frustrated. "They're treating us like lab rats," he complained to Lee So-ra during lunch. "I can't even chew my food without 3 aliens taking notes about it." But the real breakthrough came that afternoon when young Hana decided to practice her violin in the recreation area. She was a communications officer who played music as a hobby, nothing more. But the moment she drew her bow across the strings, something extraordinary happened. Every alien on the station seemed to materialize in the recreation area. They didn't walk there or take transport tubes. One moment the area was empty except for Hana, and the next it was filled with 20 alien beings, all pointing their scanning devices at her while she played a simple Bach piece. The aliens stood, perfectly still, their crystalline structures pulsing in rhythm with the music. Some were taking so many readings that sparks were literally flying from their equipment. Ambassador Velamora appeared to be in some kind of trance, her eyes wide and unblinking as she watched young Hana's fingers move across the strings. When Hana finished the piece and lowered her violin, the silence was deafening. Then suddenly, all the aliens began chattering excitedly in their own language. Their translation devices couldn't keep up with the rapid conversation, producing only fragments like unprecedented coordination, species-wide synchronization, and tactical implications. Science Officer Quindal approached Hana with something approaching reverence. That demonstration was remarkable. The precision with which you manipulated atmospheric pressure waves, the complexity of the patterns, the emotional resonance we detected in other humans throughout the station. Young Hana looked around and noticed that other humans had indeed gathered during her practice session. Some were swaying slightly to the music, others had stopped their conversations to listen. To her, this was perfectly normal. Music had always brought people together, but to the aliens, it looked like something else entirely. "Your species appears capable of transmitting complex information through coordinated acoustic manipulation," Quindal continued, his excitement growing. "The way other members of your species responded even from distant parts of the station suggests some form of instantaneous communication network." Commander Choi Woo-jin, who had been watching the whole scene unfold, stepped forward. "She was just playing music. It's art, not communication." This statement seemed to confuse the aliens even more. Art and communication were apparently the same thing in their culture. The idea that humans could create complex acoustic patterns purely for emotional or aesthetic purposes was completely foreign to them. Over the following days, the alien investigation intensified. They discovered the station's music library and spent hours analyzing every recording. Classical symphonies were interpreted as large-scale coordination exercises. Rock concerts were viewed as demonstrations of mass psychological manipulation. Even simple folk songs were seen as sophisticated information transfer protocols. Engineer Oh Seung-ho found them studying the station's communication systems with particular interest. "They keep asking about our acoustic coordination infrastructure," he reported to Dr. Kim. "I tried to explain that our intercom system is just for making announcements, but they seem convinced it's part of some planet-wide sonic network." The aliens had also begun mapping human settlements on Earth based on acoustic patterns. They were fascinated by how cities were laid out around transportation noise, how residential areas were designed to minimize sound pollution, and how entertainment districts were clustered around venues that produced what they called coordinated atmospheric disturbances. What really caught their attention was video footage of human crowds. Stadium concerts, protest marches, religious gatherings where people sang together to the aliens. These looked like displays of species-wide hive mind capabilities. The fact that humans could spontaneously synchronize their voices, clap in rhythm, or move together in response to music seemed to confirm their theory about humanity's advanced collective consciousness. The misunderstanding reached new heights when the aliens observed human reactions to unpleasant sounds. When someone dragged their fingernails across a chalkboard in the education center, every human within earshot winced and covered their ears. The aliens interpreted this as evidence of weaponized acoustic sensitivity. "They appear to have specific vulnerability frequencies," reported one alien scientist to his colleagues. "Certain acoustic patterns cause immediate defensive responses across all observed individuals." Dr. Lee Sora overheard this conversation and felt a chill run down her spine. Were the aliens studying human weaknesses? Were they planning some kind of sonic attack? The situation was spiraling out of control, and neither side fully understood what the other was thinking. The aliens were convinced they had discovered the most acoustically advanced species in the galaxy, while the humans were becoming increasingly worried about why their visitors seemed so interested in sound-based warfare. Something had to give before this. Misunderstanding led to something far more serious than confused diplomacy. The tension on the space station was thick enough to cut with a knife by the third week of alien contact. What had started as humanity's greatest moment of discovery was quickly turning into their worst nightmare. The arrival of General Mortax, the Confederation's military advisor, changed everything. Unlike the other aliens, Mortax didn't seem interested in scientific curiosity or peaceful exchange. His crystalline structures were darker, more angular, and when he looked at humans, there was something calculating in his alien eyes that made everyone uncomfortable. Dr. Kim Tae-ho noticed the shift immediately. Where Ambassador Velamora had been enthusiastic about human capabilities, General Mortax seemed concerned about them. The general's first action was to request detailed demonstrations of what he called human acoustic warfare protocols. "We need to understand the extent of your species' sonic capabilities," Mortax announced during what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic meeting. "For the safety of all parties involved." Lieutenant Park Min-soo felt his blood run cold. "Warfare protocols? General, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, but Mortax wasn't listening. He had already begun implementing what he called defensive measures. Alien technicians started installing strange devices throughout the station, devices that hummed with energy and seemed designed to block or redirect sound waves. The real trouble started when the aliens began conducting what they called response tests on the human crew. Without warning, they would play various sounds through the station's speakers and carefully document human reactions. High-pitched whines that made everyone cover their ears, low-frequency rumbles that seemed to vibrate through people's bones, sharp, sudden noises that made people jump. Engineer Oh Seung-ho was in the middle of routine maintenance when one of these tests began. A sound like fingernails on glass echoed through the engineering section, and every human in the area immediately stopped what they were doing and winced in pain. "Fascinating," muttered one of the alien observers, recording the reaction. "Universal," response pattern confirmed. Frequency 2.7 kHz produces immediate defensive behavior across all subjects. Oh Seung-ho realized with growing horror that the aliens were cataloging human weaknesses. They were treating unpleasant sounds like weapons and human discomfort like tactical intelligence. Meanwhile, Commander Choi Woo-jin discovered something even more disturbing. The aliens had been studying Earth's urban planning, focusing specifically on how cities managed noise pollution. They were particularly interested in airport flight paths, highway systems, and industrial zones. They think our noise ordinances are military strategy, Choi reported to Dr. Kim during an emergency meeting. They believe we've organized our entire civilization around acoustic warfare principles. The situation got worse when Young-ha tried to calm tensions by offering another musical performance. This time she chose a piece that required her to play with a backing track, hoping to show the aliens that human music was collaborative and peaceful. But when the recorded music began playing through the station's speakers while Hana played live, the aliens' reaction was immediate and alarming. General Mortak stood up so quickly that his chair fell over, his crystalline structures flaring bright red. Coordinated multi-source acoustic manipulation, he declared, his translated voice carrying clear notes of concern. This demonstrates the ability to synchronize sonic attacks across multiple platforms. Hana stopped playing, confused and frightened. It's just a duet. I'm playing along with a recording. But the aliens saw something entirely different. To them, it looked like humans could coordinate acoustic attacks between live performers and technological systems. The complexity of the harmonies, the precise timing, the way other humans in the area swayed along with the music, it all seemed like evidence of a sophisticated military capability. Dr. Lee Sora noticed that the aliens had begun avoiding certain areas of the station where humans gathered to talk, eat, or relax. When she asked Ambassador Vellamora about this, the answer chilled her to the bone. Our acoustic shielding is not yet sufficient to protect against coordinated human vocal patterns, Vellamora explained. When multiple humans engage in simultaneous speech, what you call conversation, our instruments detect complex overlapping frequency patterns that could potentially disrupt our neural processes. The aliens thought human conversation was a form of psychological warfare. Things reached a breaking point when someone in the cafeteria dropped a metal tray. The loud crash echoed through the dining area, and every human looked up instinctively to see what had happened. Some people even stood up to see if anyone needed help. The alien observers recorded this as evidence of instantaneous species-wide communication and coordination. To them, it looked like a single acoustic signal had triggered a synchronized response across dozens of individuals. General Mortax called an emergency meeting with the human leadership. We cannot proceed with diplomatic relations until we understand the full extent of your acoustic capabilities, he announced. Our preliminary assessment suggests your species poses a significant potential threat to Confederation security. Dr. Kim Tae-ho felt the weight of the entire situation crushing down on him. General, please, there has to be some kind of misunderstanding. We're not warriors. We're just people who happen to hear sounds. But Mortax had already made up his mind. Tomorrow, we will conduct comprehensive testing of your species' sonic coordination abilities. Failure to comply will be interpreted as hostile intent. The human crew spent that night in emergency session, trying to figure out how to prove they weren't the acoustic super soldiers the aliens believed them to be. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity's first contact with alien life was about to end in disaster because of a fundamental misunderstanding about the simple act of hearing. As Park Min-soo put it during the late-night strategy meeting, we're about to start an interstellar war because they think our ears are weapons. The next day would determine whether humanity's future among the stars would be as friends or as enemies. The next morning felt like the longest day in human history. Dr. Kim Tae-ho barely slept, knowing that everything humanity had dreamed of, peaceful contact with alien life, joining a galactic community, expanding beyond Earth, could end before it even began. General Mortax had arranged what he called a comprehensive acoustic capability assessment in the station's largest conference room. The space had been filled with alien monitoring equipment, strange devices that hummed and glowed, All pointed toward a single chair in the center where humans would be tested one by one. The atmosphere was tense enough that you could practically taste it. Ambassador Velamora looked uncomfortable with the military approach, but she wasn't in charge anymore. Mortax had made it clear that humanity would either prove they weren't a threat or face the consequences. "We will begin with basic coordination. Tests," Mortax announced, his crystalline structures pulsing with an ominous dark energy. "Each human will demonstrate their individual acoustic capabilities, followed by group coordination exercises." Lieutenant Park Min-soo volunteered to go first, partly out of duty, and partly because he wanted to get it over with. He sat in the chair while alien instruments buzzed around his head like metallic insects. "Please demonstrate your most advanced acoustic coordination protocol," Mortax commanded. Park Min-soo looked around helplessly. "I don't know what that means. Should I talk? Sing? I really don't understand what you want me to do." The aliens interpreted his confusion as either incredible modesty or deliberate deception. When Park Min-soo simply said, "Hello, can you hear me clearly?" The alien instruments went crazy with activity. They recorded the sound waves, analyzed the frequency patterns, and seemed to find hidden complexity in the most basic human speech. One by one, each human crew member went through the same bewildering process. Engineer Oh Sung-ho tried counting to 10. Lee So-ra recited a simple poem she remembered from childhood. Young Hana hummed a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. Each time the aliens found evidence of what they believed were sophisticated acoustic manipulation techniques. The group tests were even more confusing. When the humans were asked to demonstrate collective acoustic coordination, they had no idea what to do. Commander Choi Woo-jin suggested they all count to 3 together, which seemed harmless enough. 1, 2, 3, the humans said in unison, and every alien in the room stepped backward as if they'd been physically struck. "Remarkable synchronization," whispered one of the alien scientists. "Perfect timing, identical frequency modulation, flawless harmonic alignment." To the humans, they had simply counted to 3. To the aliens, it looked like a display of hive mind precision that no other species in the galaxy could achieve. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be the final test. General Mortax had arranged for a formal dinner, hoping to observe human acoustic warfare in a social setting. The entire human crew was seated at a long table, with aliens positioned around the room like guards, their instruments ready to record everything. The dinner started awkwardly, with humans trying to make polite conversation while being constantly monitored. But as the evening progressed, people began to relax despite the circumstances. They talked about their families back on Earth, shared stories about their work, laughed at old jokes they'd told 100 times before. The aliens grew more and more agitated as the evening continued. Every laugh was recorded as a coordinated vocal burst. Every conversation was analyzed as multi-layered information transfer. When someone asked for the salt and 3 people reached for it at the same time, the aliens documented it as instantaneous collective response programming. Finally, Ambassador Velamora couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. She approached the human table with something between awe and fear in her alien features. "We must ask directly," she said, her translated voice carrying an odd mixture of respect and concern. "Your species' cranial vibration detection network, is it biological enhancement or technological implantation? And how do you coordinate your entire species through atmospheric pressure manipulation?" The humans fell silent. Dr. Kim Tae-ho looked around the table at his colleagues, all of whom seemed equally baffled by the question. "Ambassador," Tae-ho said slowly, "I think we need to clear something up. These aren't advanced sensors or weapons." He touched his ear gently. "They're just ears. We use them for hearing." The room went completely quiet. Even the humming of the alien equipment seemed to fade. Science Officer Quindal's crystalline structures dimmed to almost nothing. "Hearing, you mean basic atmospheric pressure wave detection?" "Yes," Jung Hana said, speaking up from her seat. "When I played violin yesterday, I wasn't demonstrating military coordination. I was making music. It's art." "Art?" Ambassador Velmora repeated the word as if she'd never heard it before. Commander Choi Woo-jin nodded. We create sounds because we find them beautiful, because they make us feel things, because they help us connect with each other. The revelation hit the aliens like a physical blow. General Mortax sat down heavily, his dark crystalline structures flickering with confusion. These weren't the acoustic super soldiers he'd been preparing to defend against. These were just people who happened to have ears. But instead of relief, what followed was something even more profound than fear. As the truth sank in, the aliens began to realize that what they had discovered might be even more remarkable than advanced weapons technology. Humanity had taken the simple biological function of hearing and transformed it into something beautiful. The Kree. Silence that followed the revelation stretched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Dr. Kim Tae-ho watched as the aliens processed what they had just learned. Their crystalline structures were flickering in patterns he'd never seen before, cycling through colors that seemed to indicate deep thought or maybe even confusion. Ambassador Velmora was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper, through the translation device. You transform basic sensory input into beauty? Young-hana nodded, still holding her violin from the earlier demonstration. That's what music is. We take sounds and arrange them in ways that make us feel happy, sad, excited, peaceful. It's not about coordination or warfare. It's about emotion. Science Officer Quindal moved closer to the human table, his scanner forgotten in his hands. But the complexity we observed, the way your entire species responds to these acoustic patterns. Because music moves us, explained Lee Sora. When we hear something beautiful, we can't help but react. It's not military training. It's just being human. What happened next surprised everyone. General Mortax, who had seemed so threatening and suspicious, slowly approached young Hana. His dark crystalline structures were now pulsing with a soft, almost vulnerable light. Could you play that piece again? He asked, his translated voice carrying an emotion that hadn't been there before. The one from yesterday? Hyung-hana looked around at her colleagues, then at Dr. Kim, who nodded encouragingly. She raised her violin and began to play the same Bach piece that had caused such a stir the day before. But this time, everything was different. The aliens weren't taking readings or recording data. They were just listening. Really listening. And as the melody filled the conference room, something extraordinary happened. Commander Choi Woo-jin began humming along softly. Then Oh Seung-ho started tapping his fingers on the table in rhythm. Soon, without any coordination or planning, the entire human crew was participating in the music in small ways, swaying, humming, or simply closing their eyes and letting the sound wash over them. The aliens watched in amazement as they witnessed something they had never seen in all their travels across the galaxy. Here was a species that had taken the simple act of hearing and turned it into a form of collective, emotional expression. When the music ended, General Mortax did something unexpected. His crystalline structures began producing a sound, not words through the translator, but actual tones that harmonized with the fading notes of the violin. It was hauntingly beautiful, like wind chimes made of starlight. That is how my people express deep appreciation, he explained when he noticed the humans staring. But we only use it for the most sacred ceremonies. I have never felt moved to create those tones in response to simple atmospheric pressure waves. Ambassador Velmora was practically vibrating with excitement now, but it was a different kind of excitement than before. Your species has created an entire culture around acoustic expression. Poetry, music, storytelling, all forms of artistic communication that enhance the basic function of hearing. Over the following days, what had begun as a military assessment transformed into the most intensive cultural exchange in galactic history. The aliens were hungry to understand every aspect of human acoustic arts. They listened to everything, from classical symphonies to folk songs, from rock concerts to lullabies. Dr. Kim found himself giving impromptu lectures about human musical development. We don't just use music for art, he explained to a fascinated audience of alien scientists. We use it for celebration, for mourning, for bringing communities together. Every culture on Earth has developed its own musical traditions. Jung Hana, became an unofficial ambassador of human music, spending hours each day introducing the aliens to different styles and instruments. She showed them recordings of orchestras, where dozens of humans coordinated not for military purposes, but purely to create something beautiful together. The breakthrough moment came when engineer Oh Sung-ho played a recording of people singing together at a birthday party. It was just a simple happy birthday song, recorded on someone's phone, with off-key voices and laughter in the background. Ambassador Velmora listened to it 3 times, her crystalline structures cycling through every color in the spectrum. "This is remarkable," she finally said. "Your species coordinates complex acoustic patterns not for efficiency or survival, but for joy, for celebration, for love." The impact on the Galactic Confederation was immediate and profound. When the news reached other member species, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Here was a species that had discovered something that no one else in the galaxy had even thought to look for: the artistic potential of basic sensory functions. Within weeks, delegations from dozens of other species arrived at the space station, all wanting to experience human music for themselves. They brought their own instruments, their own forms of artistic expression, eager to learn from humanity's example. Commander Choi Woo-jin watched from the observation deck as yet another alien ship docked with the station. "A month ago, we were worried about starting an interstellar war over a misunderstanding about our ears," he said to Dr. Kim. "Now we're hosting the galaxy's first music festival." The Galactic Confederation extended an unprecedented invitation to humanity. They didn't want humans as allies or trading partners or even technological contributors. They wanted them as teachers, as cultural ambassadors who could help other species discover the artistic potential hidden within their own basic biological functions. Jung Ha-na was appointed as the first human cultural ambassador to the galaxy, a position that had never existed before. Her mission was simple yet revolutionary: to help other species find beauty in the fundamental aspects of existence they had always taken for granted. As she prepared for her first diplomatic mission to the Confederation's capital world, Jung Ha-na reflected on how strange it all was. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't advanced technology or military might. It was the simple recognition that listening to the world around them could be transformed into something transcendent. The story that had begun with aliens studying human head vibration sensors ended with the galaxy learning to hear music for the first time.